All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. And this is a meeting of the Planning Commission sitting tonight as the Town Center Plan Steering Committee. So it's not a full-blown Planning Commission meeting, but we're going to talk about the Town Center Plan. Before I start, a Good Samaritan has passed me a note that a white Ford pickup license plate, I presume personalized CLMX, has a ginormous nail sticking out of their right rear wheel. You might want to be aware of that. Okay, so So tonight we're going to talk about the Town Center Plan. So let me talk about a couple of things and then do a process check with Planning Commission. First of all, this has been a huge point of confusion. This is the Town Center, which is the large area that includes the Six Corners area and Old Town potentially. It is not the development by Graymore, Langers, and Walmart called Sherwood Town Center. That development is actually outside the plan area. So we're talking about the rest of Six Corners, more or less, and then the corridor down through Sherwood Boulevard into Old Town. So we're not talking about the Walmart site, or don't have any kind of an action item about the Walmart site tonight. Since there are a lot of people here tonight who I think generally haven't been engaged on this before, we thought it would be really useful to do an overview, kind of a 50,000 foot. What is the Town Center Plan? Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? That Michelle will go over. We've been conducting an online survey, and she's pulled some results hot off the press that she passed out to us, but I think I'd ask her to go over those at least verbally with some highlights. Are the results available online for people to see?
Not yet. We've talked about how to get them online before your joint session with council next week.
Okay.
We expect there probably still be some input. Do you want to do roll call real quick?
Yeah, do we have
we should probably do roll call. We don't need quorum, but it's a work session. But we should go ahead and do roll call.
We don't have to approve any minutes? There's nothing.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, there is a consent agenda.
There is?
I thought there was.
Someone told me there was no business.
From
I
the
apologize.
February.
Then let's go ahead and do roll call.
Okay. Chair Allen.
Here.
Ms. Simpson.
Here.
Ms. Walker.
Here.
Mr. Clifford.
Here.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
And Mr. Kopfer and Mr. Carey are absent.
And we have a quorum. So the consent agenda consists of the minutes of the February 12th meeting. I apologize. Has everyone had a chance to look at those? Are there changes, questions, corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve them?
I move to approve the consent agenda from February 12th, 2013.
I second it.
Stated.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
I'm
Minutes are
abstaining. I
approved.
was not on the committee.
One abstention and 4 yes votes, and so the minutes are approved. Okay. Where was I? So we're going to hear an overview of the Town Center Plan, at least discuss briefly the survey results. Then, although we don't often in work sessions, I thought we would go ahead and open it up for any kind of public testimony or comment. Can I get a rough idea, a show of hands, of how many people wanted to actually testify about the Town Center Plan tonight?
It depends on what you say.
Reserve the right to, that's fine.
Well, I have a lot of questions,
Yep.
and if you ask them, then there's not.
Okay, that's fine. Again, just a rough show of hands. So, with a reasonably small number, what I would hope to be able to do, if it makes sense to you guys, is actually try to get through the 33 recommendations and get some kind of a very. This is a study session, not a formal meeting, but get some idea of what our sense is of absolutely yes, great idea, absolutely not, terrible idea, or somewhere in the middle. Depends, need more information. What would that information be so that we can get staff to narrow down the field? Does that make sense as a kind of a way to go?
Sounds great.
Okay. So then with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle for an overview.
Thank you, Chair. So to reiterate what Chair Allen said, we're going to be taking comments at the end. Also, to help us get a little direction when we have the joint session with the City Council and the Planning Commission, I believe, next week. So that'll also be looking for some guidance on that front as well. So welcome, everyone. Those familiar with the Town Center Plan, as we've been doing this process for about a year, and those also new to the Town Center Plan. Tonight's meeting will be reviewing the planning process that we've been undertaking and talk a little bit about the preferred alternative and discuss the draft plan policies and action items. We're going to review the comments that have been made from the survey and the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, who helped help inform the steering committee from members of the community, neighbors, and also business owners that resided in the study area, as well as a technical advisory committee made up of different jurisdictions and the metro regional government, as well as some state planning agencies as well. We're going to then take some public comment on the town center plan and the action items and get some feedback and basically just listen and hear what your thoughts are about those. And at the end, there'll be time to talk to staff. We'll be remaining afterwards to talk a little bit if you have some specific questions or want some feedback about any of the thoughts that you have about the project or the process. And finally, we'll hopefully get some direction on the adoption package. That's the near term, the things that we'll be approving in the near future in June and July, and through the action items. So you might ask, why are we doing a town center plan? Back in the 1990s, Metro Council adopted what's known as the 2040 growth concept. It's a 50-year look into the future that helps guide regional growth and development. And they ask local communities and jurisdictions to help focus where they would like to have their growth and development occur over time, over this 50-year planning horizon. In 2012, the city received a grant to evaluate where we would like to designate our town center and develop a plan for that area over time. And so I want to really stress that this is a long-range plan. It's not something that a transformation that will happen overnight. It's some policy directions that the community wants to achieve over the course of a 50-year. Where do we want to see our community grow? How we want it to look, and how we're going to manage all of those things in one area. So here's a map view of the 2040 Metro Regional Growth Concept. You can see it ranges from the very large central city, as we all know, Portland, some regional centers which look like Hillsborough or Beaverton area. Also Washington Square is a regional center as well. So those are areas where tens of thousands of people come to get their retail services, and there might be larger population centers. So down to the town center are areas, there's about 30 in the whole region, from Sherwood has one, Tualatin, and King City. You can see through the western, southwest Washington County where those town centers are located. So we took the first thing that we did in this, identify a study area. What were we going to look at? Some existing conditions, opportunities where we could what looked like a town center for the community. You can see the blue highlighted area is where we included the town center study area. Those yellow areas are what's considered the corridors for transportation, and the old town has a Main Street designation, but our earlier town center boundary, what was known as the Six Corners, was exclusively retail commercial area along 99W and Tualatin Sherwood Road. So taking that information, we dived down a little bit. We conducted some stakeholder interviews back in May. We formed our committees from the business owners and community members that resided in the study area. We had an open house to get some initial feedback of what would a town center look to you, and we developed some alternatives and held another open house to get more feedback about which alternative was the preferred alternative. And so where we are tonight are developing the plan based on the alternative that was identified, and hopefully within the next month or two we'll have the adoption hearings scheduled before the Planning Commission as well as the City Council. So what we're looking at specifically tonight will be the Town Center Plan document itself, which describes and gives some background of the information that I've briefly touched upon tonight, as well as an action plan document. That's taking taking some of the items in the Town Center Plan and putting them forward into the action plan, identifying things that we want to adopt and along with our town center. So here's the boundary area that we came up with. It includes the Langer Drive district up in the north, bordered by 99W and Tualatin Sherwood Road. We have a central neighborhood area, which includes a lot of our residential neighborhoods, as well as the middle school and elementary school. And then the district where we are tonight, down in Old Town area, and that area to the south, bordered by the Cannery Square Plaza. And then on the western boundary is the Cedar Creek Trail proposed boundary for that on that side, and Langer Farms Parkway on the east side. So taking a look at some of the items in the town center plan, kind of what the future development would occur over time and what those areas would look like. The Langer Drive district would be more pedestrian friendly than what we have now. The buildings would encourage reorientation toward the street rather than the interior parking lot. And that's a good depiction on the slide of what's existing now and how that could look in the future. That's just a view of Langer Drive. And then as you come around, maybe adding some liner buildings so that that has more human scale as you approach Langer Drive and Sherwood Boulevard there. And these are just kind of some sketches of what it could look like. It's definitely not what it will look like or anything like that, just the concepts played out. The central neighborhood would remain relatively preserved, especially in the existing neighborhoods. There would be no, those houses would still be single-family homes, and that character would be preserved. The improvements would come on the way that those neighborhoods get into the different areas, from the retail area on the Langer Drive district north, as well as easier walkability or being able to bicycle down into Old Town a little bit better. Where there are some multifamily vacant parcels already existing, that land could develop as well over time into multifamily uses. And this is a cross-section of Sherwood Boulevard as envisioned, with some of these changes occurring over time. Now, here in Old Town, some of the inclusion would be a higher intensity mixed-use development where it's zoned retail, potentially, and an infill and redevelopment at a higher density, including townhomes and multifamily. A lot of what people love about Sherwood is the Old Town area, and it really includes a lot of classic concepts of a town center. It's very walkable. You can get from small storefront to storefront easily. There's some great sidewalk grid within the city. There's a lot of street furniture and amenities that really are unique and provide that character that makes town centers differentiated from place to place. So taking some of those overall concepts throughout the whole center would be enhanced streetscapes. Talked a little bit about those wider sidewalks, improved landscaping, and really getting the multimodal transportation involved. There would be some bike-friendly streets on 10th and Glen Eagle, and add those connections. Also, an important feature would be added gateways where those roadways cross the edges or the entranceways into the town center area. And we'd include some elements on those main corridors to unify the area and really make people want to walk around in the town center area. So at this time, Chris Majeski's here from DKS, and he can talk a little bit about the traffic.
Just in the nick of time. All right. Well, the new information we have from the traffic analysis builds on what Michelle was just describing. The town center area itself, series of roadways, sidewalks, bicycle improvements, that's to facilitate traffic within the town center. But one of the things that we didn't have when we've talked with you before was information about what are the impacts to the surrounding network if there's increases in land use density. So we're required to do a transportation planning rule analysis, the OAR 660, that says how would your comp plan, your transportation system plan change with changes in land use or the transportation network? So we're looking at impact analysis in a 20-year horizon. When we do that analysis, we build upon what's already in the plan. So with the zoning that's in place, population employment growth around the city, there's already a certain amount of growth allocated for the future. Your transportation system plan assumes a certain amount of growth. So what we look at is what's the increment, what's the additional growth that might happen with these changes in land use that we're talking about. And the numbers on the screen there summarize that. About 125 additional dwelling units, 400 additional employees, and it's a little over 1,000 additional trips motor vehicle trips that would be on the network in the peak hour. So just that additional increment is what we have to evaluate and see if that causes facilities you have to fail, to not meet standards any longer, or if they're already failing in the future, you can't make them any worse. So we model that. We have a model for the region. We've detailed it for Sherwood. And this map is showing by thickness of the lines where the traffic increases would be. So Sherwood Boulevard, Langer Drive, where the increases in density are projected to possibly happen, you'll see thicker bands there. That's where those 1,000 trips are going. As you get to the edges, since there's already growth happening there, that traffic kind of disperses and the effect is diluted as you get to the edges. But the important thing to note is on 99, where we have congestion in the future, things are already going to fail to meet standards. Any growth we have out on that highway corridor, we probably have to mitigate for.
So just to be really clear, so the thick line is thick lines are traffic increases above what would happen anyway, and what would happen anyway is development that's already in the plan out there, growth in Newburgh, whatever, right?
Yep, growth in the region, growth in the city, growth in people driving from Washington to the coast, whatever it is, that's all accounted for.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is just that increment
above and beyond that. Right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so with that volume above and beyond what's already planned for, we looked at a few key intersections around town, the signals out on the highway, some of the problem spots in town like 3rd and Washington and some of the other key intersections. And what we found was, it's like some of my animation got a little messed up. So all these locations with dots are study intersections, and every place that has a green dot means that's a location that in that 20-year horizon with the land uses that are planned, with the improvements that are already planned, we meet the city or the ODOT or the county standard, whoever's intersection it is. Anything with a yellow dot, the signal at Home Depot, the signal at Sherwood Boulevard and 99W, are locations that are projected to not meet standards in the future based on the financially constrained project list. So if we add volume to any of those yellow intersections, we likely have to mitigate for it. Or any of those green locations, if we add so much volume that it causes it to fail, we have to mitigate for that. So with the proposed plan, the only change, and I'll toggle between the two, down at Meineke in 99, we add enough traffic volume there that it causes it to go above the standard. And then, of course, the two that were already failing, we have added volume there, so we have to mitigate those 3 locations. Everything else on the city street system, down into Old Town, Century Drive, we're adding traffic there, but we're operating well enough that we're still meeting your standards for delay level of service. So the mitigation locations are circled in red, and we looked at what the fixes might be to offset those impacts. At the traffic signal up at Home Depot, and this assumes that the Adams or Langer Farms Parkway extension is built. At that intersection approaching the highway, we need an additional left turn lane. We need dual left turns.
So coming out of Home Depot,
Coming out of
the new street extension.
Yep.
Okay.
2 left turn lanes. Yep.
Makes sense.
Down at Edie by Walgreens and McDonald's there, both directions approaching the highway would need dual left turn lanes. So 2 lefts, a single through, and a right on both approaches to the highway. And then down at Meineke, it's a fairly simple change. There's some delay for the left turn movements that we can deal with changing the signal phasing. Instead of just a permitted or a green ball, we can put in an arrow indication and handle that traffic adequately. So the real cost in these mitigations is where we're adding the left turn lanes. At Edie Road, Sherwood Boulevard, at the highway, we estimate an approximately $1 million for those improvements there. And then up at the Home Depot intersection, roughly $250,000. So those are the mitigations that go above and beyond all the other improvements we've described within the town center boundary and offset the impacts of the additional traffic.
Hey, Chris, what's the timeline on this? I mean, this is a 20, 30-year plan, so at what point do the intersections go yellow as opposed to staying green?
Well, we don't have an interim year analysis. What we're looking at is over a 20-year horizon, what has to be in your plan. And so these mitigation locations, to meet TPR requirements, you would have to say there's a reasonable funding source from the city or partnerships with other agencies to put these mitigations in place sometime over that 20-year period.
Well, we don't know. Like Home Depot might be 15 years, and Edie Road might be 5. We don't know that.
We don't know that based on the analysis to date. No.
Okay.
Does the analysis assume preserving the the signalized intersection at the entrance to the theater and Albertsons?
Good question. We looked at that a couple different ways because of the county's MISTIT project that's going on. The base assumption that a lot of this analysis was built on was what's in your transportation system plan, which actually keeps that signal and takes the one at Les Schwab out. That's what's in the current transportation system plan. We looked at it in several different variations of that because the county project is looking at several options and found that outside of that immediate area, those couple of signals, the impacts on the highway and other locations, there weren't any significant differences in findings with those different variations.
How do those affect the existing businesses along those corners with the improvements as far as
in terms of right-of-way?
Yes.
When we looked at the footprint of particularly Sherwood Boulevard and Edie approaching the highway where the dual left turn lanes are required, there would be landscaping areas that are impacted, but it didn't look like any buildings would have to be taken.
I know there's I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There's a water quality facility next to the gas station right there on the corner of Sherwood Boulevard and 99. How would that be affected?
Don't have that level of detail. When you go to design those, you can widen to one side of the road or split the difference between both sides. And we don't have that level of design done at this point to answer that.
So you talked about removing the traffic light.
I think Brad wanted to answer further on
I
that.
was just going to add to that if that did go away, I mean, when we add the left turn lanes or the additional right-of-way, we have to also treat that additional stormwater that we're going to have to collect and treat somewhere else. So there might be an addition of a regional stormwater quality facility somewhere else within that basin. So some of those smaller stormwater quality facilities might go away or get reconfigured so that they're deeper or longer to meet whatever standards are in place by Clean Water Services at that time.
Jim?
So you talked about removing the traffic light at Les Schwab.
That's what's in the current plan, so that was one of the scenarios.
Are they going to make the oncoming to that light from the target area, are they going to make that a right turn only? Will it still... I'm just picturing the problem with people trying to make a left-hand turn across all those lanes onto Wallet and Sherwood Road.
If that's the option the county chose to go with, it would probably be a right-in, right-out configuration, but my understanding is that's not the current option that's on the table. But I think some of the city staff has been coordinating with the county more recently than I have.
I guess I would have to defer to Bob. The county has not selected an alternative. Bob's not here tonight, but they have not selected an alternative. There are, how many, Tom? 5? 4? There are 3 different alternatives that are currently on the table with the county. One is the closure of the light at Baylor, the one down at Target, and the third one would not have any of those taken out, but it has something to do with the right-of-way width, how much of the buildings you're going to have to clip. So there's a lot that they're trying to go with, and that is not affected by the town center plan. That is a specific funded project that is in process now. So the design would be depending on what the county decided to do and which option they decide to go with.
Okay. I was just, my concern's more from a safety perspective, people trying to make a left-hand turn out of there with no light and the potential for
They would probably have a median.
Yeah, I'm certain the
Issues
county
there.
wouldn't allow an unsignalized intersection where they would have that left turn movement. And if they did, we'd probably be all over for for allowing something like that. But it's not
You have your
something that
lose your
certainly is
staff.
on the table.
Okay.
appreciation.
And how about access? Do you guys think that'll affect access to Les Schwab at all?
It potentially will, and that's part of the negotiations that are ongoing with each one of these options is who's willing to give up access, how they will access their site, and where it would be affected.
Okay.
But so just to be clear, we don't get to advise anybody on that. We're not making recommendations about that. That's a county project, and there's a process, and those business owners are, I presume, I should
Correct.
ask the question,
Okay.
are engaged in that process.
Correct.
Good.
And I should also say that one of the primary goals of that MISTIP project is to improve the intersections so that traffic's flowing better through there, so that it'd be highly unlikely that they would put in a situation where you're adding conflict to the
for sure.
turn movements and things like that. So.
Good
Good
questions. All right. So the last thing that I was going to talk about with those mitigations, that 1.35 million in improvements that I identified, you have options. You don't necessarily have to put those mitigations in place. One of the things with the town center plan, there's new regulations in the OARs for a multimodal mixed use area, an MMA. It's a new thing in the transportation planning rule. It's been around for a year or two. And in the metro region, town centers and regional centers are often viewed as kind of the poster childs for where MMA should be, where you have high densities of mixed land uses, good transit service, parking management, all those things in place. The state has said you're doing enough with the transportation system with demand management in those locations that TPR isn't going to hold you to widening roads for capacity impacts, because it's actually counterproductive to making a walkable, bikeable area. And so if the city wanted to pursue getting an MMA designation for the town center or a portion of the town center, you may not have to build those mitigations that I was talking about.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
You just stated that that's only been in effect for about a year. Are there any functioning examples that we can see in the works to see if they're actually functioning and working?
Yeah, there's several that are in process. Lake Oswego was the first one to move ahead with it. And the last I heard, they were in the adoption phases. I'm not sure if everything's been completed. But from my understanding, what they decided to do in a similar type of analysis was to go ahead and still program some of the improvements they identified that they wanted on their system. But then they had the MMA in place, so if additional development came in wanting rezones, there would be less burden on that future land use applications. But they had still identified some reasonable mitigations that they wanted in place for the performance of their network. They moved ahead with an MMA.
Yeah, seems like they didn't want to give it all up.
So the answer is no. Is there any place
Right.
outside of Oregon that is using this model?
This is an Oregon-only land use law. So Lake Oswego is the first one through, and they're just
And
just
which
finishing
areas
the
are they
adoption.
using it for? Are they using it for
the state
core-
and A core downtown area.
just the straight core down?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would also add to that as well. I mean, staff has had discussions multiple occasions about the MMA, and I think that there are enough questions with the MMA process that we would probably recommend against it right now. There's currently, we're not sure whether or not if you get designated an MMA, whether or not you could get state funding for certain transportation improvements. It's not clear to us.
Yeah.
And so I
That's what I
think
was
that
thinking.
at this point, that's something that if we decided to do it, it would be well down the road, at least from our perspective of recommending it to you.
So just to make sure I understand the financing accurately, the 1.35 million that would be identified, that were identified in those improvements, those are improvements that would be driven by growth related to changes in the town center designation, when so development proposals came in, we would be able to assign proportionate shares of cost to the development that came in as a result of that, and so that would be the funding source, presumably, for those kinds of improvements. Am I right about that?
That's one of your options. If you decide those mitigations would be part of your capital improvement plan and programmed into SDCs, that's certainly an option you could take for a reasonable funding stream.
Okay.
I just have a question.
First on the vote.
Just to make sure that the traffic studies are also based on commercial traffic, like large semis. Is there any percentage of how many of those will be increased based on areas outside of Sherwood, like McMinnville and Newburgh, coming in along 99 to those intersections?
When we do the future 20-year forecast, freight mobility is part of that. There's a truck model that runs with the car model and gives us the data. The percentage of trucks on the road aren't forecast to significantly change. They're all growing relatively equal to each other. And then specific to the town center plan land use, we weren't recommending options in the land uses that would significantly increase truck traffic in Sherwood. And so we didn't make any specific adjustments for those freight percentages when we ran the operations analysis, but those are part of the modeling.
Any other questions? Anything else?
Just the other two options that are there, if the MMA designation didn't sound appealing to you, but you still wanted to reduce the amount of mitigations that would be required, you could pursue alternate mobility targets on the highway, work with the state, and say, we as the city of Sherwood are agreeable to more congestion if it means certain other benefits to you. And that's something that if you implemented wouldn't be just for rezones. Like the MMA is only applicable for rezones. Alternate mobility standard would be for everybody. Every conforming use that came in would have a different set of standards to follow. So that's an option for you, and you could reduce needed capacity improvements if you went down that path. And the third option, and this is a metro area specific one that's similar to an MMA. In the metro area, they allow you, when you do the traffic analysis, to assume there'll be 30% fewer cars on the road in an MMA because it's a high-density, mixed-use, managed area. When we did our analysis, we did not assume that 30% reduction. There's a whole series of kind of checklist requirements with densities and management strategies that you need to have in place to do that. I think parking might have been the one thing that isn't currently in place in Sherwood with management strategies to allow you to directly claim that reduction. But if you wanted to do that and have a 30% reduction applied to all traffic studies in the town center area, you could not do the double left turn lanes at 99 and Edie and still meet the standards. So it would get out of that one large mitigation.
At the risk of sounding really cynical, much as I'd like to figure out how to obviously make things more walkable and more bike and pedestrian friendly, those three strategies sound like various versions of pretend there won't be as much traffic and,
Right.
and not do the improvement.
Yeah, it's really a trade-off of if you think smaller roads are more important for walking and biking than the amount of congestion you have, that's a trade-off. If you're willing to accept congestion for the footprint of
you make
streets.
you make the road bigger, which means the signal's not long enough for someone to get across, and if you make the signal longer, then you mess up all the whatever you're going to do. Yeah, I know, I get it.
Yep, it's that balance. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's it.
I have one more question
Yeah,
regarding
sure.
the cap that they approached in part of the documents that we received, removing that cap requirement. Would you like to discuss that at all?
Yeah, the future forecasts that are in place for the city that are built into Metro's travel demand models really don't account for the cap ordinance specifically. When we did our analysis, we tried to control for that in the base scenario as much as we could. And then this increment of growth, particularly out in the Six Corners area where we're talking about infilling some of the parking lots and putting more pads in, that would certainly go above and beyond what's allowable by our cap ordinance. And so we view the traffic analysis that was done and the mitigations that were identified as adequate analysis for the transportation planning rule findings where you could do away with the cap ordinance for that area if you chose to.
So your belief is that the ordinance that we put in place to protect the development throughout the Highway 99 area, which is 43 trips per commercial acre, with everybody buying on that at the time of development many, many years ago when it was put in place, your statement is that it is no longer going to be something we need to continue to enforce because we're going to allow development now to exceed those trips that were put restrictions on the previous developers.
Correct. We've accounted for that additional growth in this analysis and have plans in place for it. So if you kept the cap ordinance in place, you wouldn't achieve the land use densities that are in this plan.
So the trade-off is if we want to maintain 43 trips per commercial acre, then we don't get the density that we want. But
Correct.
if we do get that density, then we're going to have
mitigations for it.
What type of increase would we expect to? And at that point, then there would be no cap. Anybody could put in outside the town center because you're trying to get no drive-ins, no driving uses in the town center. So people across the street from the town center area then would be allowed to put in without restriction any type of high vehicle traffic uses. Correct?
Like, repeal the cap within the town center area or in general?
No, in the town center is what this says.
This analysis is adequate for the town center. When you update your transportation system plan, that might be one of the topics you want to explore citywide. Does a cap ordinance make sense anymore?
Because that would be, I mean, interesting.
Michelle, anything else?
So, thanks. So in taking a look at the town center goal, that has been identified as future residential growth, economic development, and public investment in the Sherwood Town Center will enhance urban vibrancy, encourage active transportation, and improve safety and efficiency for all modes of transportation. So when we look at that, some of the policies that could be implemented with this plan are to highlight the unique characteristics of the town center area, encourage an active mix of uses and activities, make sure that we have a pedestrian-friendly environment that has human scale elements, including a lot of the things that you see currently in the views. Higher density in the town center, transportation improvements, the parking is available for the uses proposed, and public investment in amenities and infrastructure are some of the other policies that have been identified. So in taking a look at those policies, how can we make sure that those are implemented in the way that is proposed? We've set forth 3 different tiers for the action plan. We have the adoption plan elements, which include amending the comprehensive plan and also the map, and taking a look at some of the development code changes that could be enacted along with the plan. Further out are some next step items that need some further discussion on the policy and public involvement, and they're possible to achieve within 5 years. And then what we're calling a long-term action item or a long-term bucket, those are achievable within the next 10 years. They require a lot more discussion and study and to find resources available to enact some of those action items. So initially, the adoption package are what we're calling the plan amendments, and that will be through the adoption through the process with the Planning Commission and the City Council. We'll amend the comprehensive plan along with the town center plan and include the plan map and the new boundary with that, and then some of the updates to the transportation system plan that have been identified. Also, along with the adoption package that we're talking about, the development code amendments, and these are some of the things that were involved in the survey and some of the things, specific code changes that we can talk a little bit more, amending the townhome requirements for Old Town, restricting or prohibit new motor vehicle related and land extensive uses in the retail and general commercial zones. So those would be things like the drive-through or car lots, things like that, that really eat up a lot of land rather than encourage that walkability that we're aiming for. and prohibit or restrict construction of new drive-through facilities in the town center boundary area, and allow certain civic and commercial uses outright rather than conditional uses, and those would be like parks and schools and libraries, things like that, that have normally been a conditional use requiring that added layer of review. Also, some other amendments that we've been talking about are reducing the setbacks to have the buildings be right up at the street and the sidewalk corner. Require that projects using commercial design review matrix that you're familiar with have some extra added points if they're located within the town center. And the height restriction from 40 feet currently to using the retail commercial zone height of 50 feet that's in the other areas other than Old Town. And so some short-term next step items, they may need some further review and again within the 5-year time frame. So when you're looking at some of these short-term items, next steps in the action plan, are there anything that you think are some early wins that we can move over to the adoption package, or are there items that you think really need to be tabled for a further longer view discussion, or are there some of the items that you really just think aren't applicable for the city at this time? And then the same with some of the long-term items. They definitely require some further study, talking about a parking study or formulation of some committees and some gateway improvements as well. And again, are any of those unreasonable or undesirable to address? And should any of the long-term items be considered moved toward a short-term item? So in talking a little bit, we did have a survey online to address some of the action items. It was a 31 survey, so we got 40 responses, and everybody didn't answer every question, which wasn't expected. And they were questions about the plan itself and the boundary and also the action items. So the questions, we really just asked a range from strongly support to strongly opposed or had no opinions, and there was room for comments as well. So taking a look at those today, some of the comments were primarily supportive of some of the elements for inclusion of the walkability and addressing some of the commercial changes to the commercial zoning to include some getting rid of some of those auto-dependent uses in the town center boundary. Also, a lot of people, there was some confusion about the development itself, whether the town center plan included the Walmart or not, and the misnomer with the names was also, could tell some people were not sure about the town center plan itself and had comments based on the Walmart application. So taking a look at tonight, we'll get some feedback on the plan, hopefully, and the policies and the action items, and there'll be other opportunities in the future to speak with respect to what's going on. This is the first stab at the plan. We're here tonight to get feedback on the plan and hear from you, and then once we get those comments and feedback from the steering committee, we'll be reviewing that information and revising the plan as we go get ready for the upcoming adoption hearings. And I also want to stress that this is a long-range plan, so we're not going to be taking a look at these changes currently. It'll be over time, and what will encourage the type of community in the way that it looks for the long haul.
So just to be clear, and maybe to kind of reiterate, and I know some people came in after we started at the beginning as well. So the idea tonight is to hear some public comment, ideally for us to get quickly through the 33 and get some sort of a rough idea of what our own thinking is in preparation for the joint work session with the council. We've got the work session with the council next Tuesday. I'm assuming that's going to be a more standard work session where it's just us and the council and not a public comment session.
I believe it is. We're going to have it's an earlier session on it.
6 o'clock, I think.
Yes.
It's going to be geared towards a discussion between the council and the steering committee.
So basically,
planning commission.
So basically, get their reactions and feedback to us, and then I'm assuming we'll have at least one more work session before we even begin to go to public hearing here, and then one or more public hearings before we make a recommendation, which will go to the council, where they will again have a public hearing where there will be testimony. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying there are several bites at the apple for discussion about it. Yeah,
Can I make one comment before we start having people discuss the handout that was handed out at the last meeting? Once you get past number 13, the numbering is off, and so if they just say action item number 16, then they want to talk about it.
You might say what the action
item is, because this says action item 16 is one thing, but the action item in the plan itself is something different. So the numbering on this, you know what I'm talking about, this spreadsheet is
That's only you received
that wasn't handed out to anybody. I thought it was handed out last time to.
Yeah, the plan document's got more detailed descriptions than this document does for
Okay.
like a worksheet.
Oh, good, because it was a very useful tool. Very useful. But the numbers don't.
Yeah, go ahead and send that one up too. Okay, so what I'd like to do is go ahead and if there's anyone who'd like to talk to us about what they've heard or questions they have.
They're getting them.
They're on their way.
They're getting some right now.
I thought we had like 25 out there, and I've only got 4 here.
I don't know.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and open up for public comments. And if you want to talk about anything here, we'll do 3 minutes per person. And again, just a reminder, if you came in late, we're talking about the town center plan, which is not the same as the Sherwood Town Center development, which is outside the town center plan area. I know that's a horrible confusion, but this is the area of Six Corners that's not involved in that development, along with the corridor down Sherwood Boulevard to Old Town. So with that, I'll start calling names, and I think I've got, is it Zara Mays? And if when you start, you just give us your name and address, that'd be great.
Okay. Hi, I'm Xana Mays,
Sorry.
and I'm here tonight because I especially wanted to thank each of you for the many long hours you have devoted to help make our city a great place to live. I know that attending the Planning Commission meetings is a major commitment, but the reading and the studying that must be done to prepare for the meetings has to be a huge obligation. It is clear that this is a very complicated process. The planning of what is best for Sherwood and for its citizens for next year, much less to attempt to envision what must be best for 10 or 20 years in the future. I, like too many of the citizens of Sherwood, have not attended many of your meetings. I apologize. I did, however, attend the last meeting on May 14th to listen to your report and to listen to what was going to be said about the town center action, which we did not get to, unfortunately. I want to tell you I was highly impressed by you as you listened to and responded when possible to what was said during citizen comments regarding the Walmart store. It had to be extremely frustrating to be blamed for what was said to be your actions or your decisions when in fact you had nothing to do with any of the Walmart issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the Town Center Action Plan, I am especially interested in Action 7. It's about parking. And I just wanted to mention that I strongly believe that there should be at least one parking place for every apartment or townhouse or a home, for that matter, in Sherwood. And I do not support removing the requirement that garages be provided. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Nancy Taylor?
Nancy Taylor, 17036 Southwest Lindley Way, Sherwood, Oregon, 97140. And I would like to talk about the Town Center Action Plan. And I guess I want to ask a question of the traffic study.
Sure, go ahead, and if you've got a number of questions, ask them, and we'll see what we can.
Okay. My question about the traffic study is, you know, I look at it, and it still makes no sense to me. This is the third meeting I've come to, and it still makes no sense to me because I'm on it every day. Between the theater and crossing 99, it takes up to 3 times going through a light. And for you to continually come and tell us the same piece of information really has me worried about the traffic study and the quality of traffic studies we're doing here and what we're paying money for, not just the city of Sherwood, but Washington County, the state of Oregon, which I pay taxes to. And I'm so frustrated that again and again and again the same traffic studies are being shown to me, and they don't seem to take into consideration what's happening on a daily basis. If you drive from Tualatin at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to Sherwood, it's taken a lot of time. The only time I can go is 2 in the morning and not have a lot of traffic. So I need someone to justify these traffic studies to me so that we're not pouring money into traffic studies that don't make any sense.
Chris, do you want to talk about that intersection particularly and what its current level of service is? And
well, it's not just that. It's that he pointed out 3 areas that have this dot and all of that. You know, and I studied statistics. I made an A in statistics in college, and I understand statistics and how we can use them. I understand studies, and I understand impact. I understand all these words. They're not, but I keep looking at these studies, and they make no sense to me because I know the reality of commuting on these highways, 99, Tualatin, Sherwood, Roy Rogers.
That's what I was asking him to speak to.
Yeah, so a couple things come to mind. One is this 20-year analysis assumes that there's significant improvements to Tualatin Sherwood Road. The county's project to widen from Borchers over to Lang Farms Parkway puts additional lanes on Tualatin Sherwood Road. That's all assumed to be in place. So there's less congestion with those improvements than what you have today. So that's one big fundamental background going into all of this. And that's why the analysis isn't showing significant improvements needed at that location. The other locations through the study area where we're showing more traffic, there's a certain standard that the city or the county or ODOT have adopted as to what's the minimum performance level. Most locations within the city of Sherwood are well below that level right now. You can accommodate a lot more traffic than is there today and still meet that performance standard. So that's what we're measuring against, is that standard that's in place. You may or may not agree with the standard, but that's what we're studying.
What's the level of service at Tualatin Sherwood and 99 right now?
It's right at capacity. The volume to capacity ratio, which is what ODOT uses, not level of service, it's 95+% utilized. It's right at capacity.
So they don't use the if you're sitting there at multiple cycles, that's a failed intersection standard any longer?
That's not ODOT standard now.
Okay. And is there still a project? Is there a project in the pipeline that has to do with the timing of the signals along Tualatin Sherwood Road?
Yes, the county has. That's a near-term project, an ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems project, to coordinate the signals on Tualatin Sherwood Road. Today, they're not coordinated. The signals don't communicate with each other, and that's something that I believe the design for that is getting going this next year.
So that's a funded project.
Correct.
That they're moving forward on. I know the thing you went up, but we were answering the question. So do you have other questions?
I do.
Sure.
I'll be back next week. I'll be back the week after that, so I'll ask then.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bridget Story.
Bridget Story, 23900 Southwest Red Fern. I have so many questions and so little time. What I'd like to say is I work for the Chamber of Commerce. I know you from the Chamber from years ago and sat in on the initial meetings between Graymore and Langer in the city. And I was also in on a number of the initial meetings for this town center development. And somewhere in my garage, I've been digging around to find the original artist renderings that have been trash canned. And one of my first questions would be why what was promised to the citizens and to the businesses down here was shoved aside, and why the city has chosen to go with what they've got planned for down here now with the high density apartment complex, and that brings me to the Cultural Arts Center. I would like to know who's accountable for the fact that we just paid a whole bunch of money and came up and spent a whole bunch of money coming up with a plan for a cultural arts center, and then somehow it's structurally unsound and we have to tear it down. We have technology nowadays that can account for that, and I want to know why that happened. That should never have happened. It was a considerable waste of taxpayer dollars. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think it's disingenuous to state that you guys don't have any impact or input into what's going to happen on 12th and Sherwood Road. You guys know what the county is planning. I think you ought to just state it clearly and how that's going to mesh with what we're talking about here tonight so that everybody understands. I guess one of the basic questions is, what do we want Sherwood to look like? Do we want to bring in all of that business, all of that traffic? Do we want to draw traffic in, or do we want to serve the growth that we have now and the people that we have now and the growth rate that we have now? Large businesses are going to bring in large amounts of traffic that we can't, as in our current infrastructure, support. So to say that we don't have to implement these plans is disingenuous, because you know that if you bring Walmart in and a bunch of other big businesses, we can't infrastructurally support that. And it just seems like we're getting the shuck and jive. You know that this stuff is going to have to happen. You know you're going to have to either tax us or levy us to do it. So we would like to know what the actual plan is instead of hypotheticals. There needs to be a written plan before anything is implemented. And it doesn't seem, it seems like this, let's just get it started. What it seems like we're saying is, let's just get started and see what happens.
Have you had a chance to see the written plan we're talking about tonight?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty, I mean, the 33 recommendations are reasonably detailed.
How does that mesh in with what the county's going to do?
Well, we've talked from a transportation standpoint about taking into consideration investments that are already on the docket to be done. We're talking about the investments that need to get done in addition to that. So you may think that we're not adequately taking them into consideration. I think that's fine. We may think that as well when we get to that. But I think that what this is an effort to say, what should this area be like in the future? And how should we take into consideration all those different elements?
Well, and I guess that's one of my biggest questions. What is Sherwood going to look like? Do we get any say on that, or is this process so far beyond resident and citizen input that you guys are just going to plan it for us? I've heard
we're all citizens and residents as well, right?
I understand that, but I've heard by 2020 we have a population density outlook of 36,000, and by 2030 it's going to be 50,000. Is that true? Is that what we're planning for? What is this all going to look like to everybody else? What do we want it to look like? And I guess that is what everybody here might be a little wound up about, is that we don't feel like we have a lot of input in what we want the city to look like. And what
would you like it to look like?
I would like for it to have a reasonable growth rate and not bring a lot of additional traffic into the city in the form of people who would not normally come here. And perhaps that's naive, but I think that our infrastructure does not support bringing in substantial amounts of new people and new traffic. Yeah. Sherwood will continue to grow, and that's progress. But I don't think that bringing in substantial amounts of new people in such a short period of time is reasonable for what we have going here without levying insane amounts of new taxes. And that's what I see happening. How are we going to pay for all of this?
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
And schools. I mean, we don't have enough schools to support the kids that we have now. What's going to happen when we bring all those people in? We're going to have more school levies. Well, we're going to pay for the school levies we have now for how many more? 15 more years. So, and SDC fees. Why does Sherwood charge some of the highest SDC fees in the state that discriminate against small businesses? And I think that's part of the frustration with this process with some of the citizens, is that the SDC fees are so outrageous that it discriminates against small businesses, but then we see Walmart come in, plop in, and say, here we are. Why is it so hard for a small business to start, and why isn't there more support for that?
Jean, you had a question?
Yeah, so you're asking the same questions that we, as citizens on the steering committee, are asking. What do we want the city of Sherwood to look like? So one of the action points that I keep asking myself is, we've heard so many times. When I first moved to Sherwood, a lot of what we heard was, you can't even buy a pair of pants in Sherwood. We need to bring in commercial development. I mean, that's been a really long time ago. And so now you can buy a pair of pants in Sherwood. But next step became, well, Old Town, we need to do something to make Old Town more vibrant, more active, because Old Town's dying. Part of this plan is trying to address that, and it asks the question, should we increase the height in Old Town? And so I ask you, is that a question, I would, as a citizen, want to be able to answer that question. And, we have a survey online or an ability to say, anybody in the room could walk up and say, no, I don't want, my opinion is that we should not raise the height in Old Town. And that's the question that we have to ask and answer here. And I am thrilled to see so many people in the room, because I've been for years looking at empty rooms. So having people here that are interested in saying, action item number whatever says increase the height in Old Town to 50 feet. I'm against that. Well, if we have 40 people in the room that tell us we don't want the height raised in Old Town to 50 feet, then that gives us the feedback that we know. And you're at the perfect point, in my opinion, to be able to make a comment that will change the way Sherwood can grow or remain the same. But if you don't increase the density, then you don't increase the traffic and you don't increase the business opportunities for the people that are here. And that's what we have to struggle with.
Well, and that's a hard thing, and providing a tax base for the city is a difficult thing without bringing in a whole lot of new business. But I think one of my biggest frustrations is that small businesses are very much discriminated against. I think you all know, our SDC fees are outrageous comparatively. And it's not a business-friendly environment for small business. So why is that? Why can't we bring in more small businesses and make this a friendlier place instead of the solution being a whole bunch of large businesses in an area that can't infrastructurally support it? That's how the citizens see it. We may not be completely right, but that's how we see it. And like I said, I have the artist renderings for down here of what it was supposed to look like when all of this started, and that hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on that, and then it was scrapped. Why? Why was that scrapped? Why wasn't that plan implemented? Because that was a whole lot more aesthetically pleasing and a whole lot more citizen pleasing than what's proposed now. And then we could talk about the Cultural Arts Center. That's very frustrating, because if I waste that kind of money in my budget, it hurts. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability with the city on things like that. So. There you go.
Thank you. Have we got more sheets over there? Somewhere. John Carter.
Does not appear to be here.
No John Carter. Okay. Dean Boswell.
So I don't think I'm going to get through all my questions. I've probably got 20 or 30 of them.
And if you want to send us an email or a letter or something like that, that's useful too.
Okay. And I'm going to start, and I'm not out to offend, but I'm going to start like I did the city council. I've heard a lot of people haven't shown up to meetings, and I've heard a lot of, the county regulates this and the state regulates that. And right now, I think my biggest question, because I'm not opposed to this. I'm opposed to a lot of things in it, and I think we haven't addressed a lot of issues that we currently have that this brings up more of the same. But what I'm going to say is what is your job for real? If it's the county sets things out and the state sets things out, and you can't do anything without us showing up to meetings, do we really need you guys? Can you guys honestly say that we need you? Because I think everybody knows that we want to grow healthy, we want roads. I don't give a crap what the county says. We want roads that are going to be efficient for us. We want roads that aren't, these people are crying about 12 Sherwood Highway, and there's a reason. I don't even go down it anymore unless I have to. I go all the way to Wilsonville and back up to go to Tualatin. And I don't give a crap what the county says it is. It's bad. We have to, right now, you guys are living like it's Tom Scary's busy town, that everything's cool, everybody's happy, little mouse is going around. And that's not the truth. The truth is there's some messed up stuff, and the county says it's okay, and you're accepting that. You and the city council are supposed to be there for us and supposed to be working for us. We've got, and I'm going to give you most of these questions in email, just like you said, because I'm going on. I'm almost out of time. Went over the traffic. I'm also concerned. You got complete anarchy going on in this town. You guys are planning like, oh yeah, the roads are good. And we can't even drive down them in town because of skateboarders. Skateboarders are pissed off in their anarchy. It takes me 20 minutes to get from this intersection here, where the little new park is here, down to the junior high, because skateboarders are in the middle of the street. It's anarchy because they're pissed off that they don't have a skate park, whatever. Are we planning for this? Are we going to at least pull if we're going to say we're not going to do a skate park? Because I don't care. I hear a lot of drugs going to skate parks. I don't care about it. But if we're not going to do it, are we going to plan for more police to arrest these people? What I'm saying is, you guys have a lot of plans, but I don't think you're fully thinking them all out. I don't think you guys are asking the right questions, and I think you're letting the state and the county bully you into what is good for Sherwood and not doing what is really good for Sherwood. So then I have to ask the question once again, what is your job? If you're not going to protect us, if you're not going to do what's right, if you're not going to look and say, I don't give a crap what this study says, this is bad, then what do we need you for? You guys have to ask yourself that question. I'll send you an email with all my questions, but I want you guys to ask that question to yourselves, okay? Thank you.
Let me answer that a little bit tonight on the fly, and if other commissioners want to weigh in, feel free as well. I think our job, real simple, is twofold. It's to advise the city council on how we should use land and facilities in the city, and once they've decided what to do with our recommendations and made the rules, to look at development to see if it meets those rules. That's our job in a real simple nutshell. A lot of the issues get really complicated. I absolutely understand and agree with your frustration about Tualatin and Sherwood Road. End of the day, all of that frustration doesn't change the fact the county owns it. It's their road. And whatever, we can do all kinds of things here, but it's their road. And they get to decide what to do with their road. That makes it complicated. That's not to say we have no influence, no control, nothing like that. And I don't think anyone, I certainly don't believe that we have no influence, no control, or those kinds of things. But the issues end up being complicated by those things, like the state owns our main highway, the county owns our most messed up road. We control how the land gets used. We make recommendations to council. Sometimes they take them, sometimes they don't. Something gets done, and then a development comes in. And I mean, the big frustration I've had through a few of these things is these aren't real until there's an actual development. And when there's an actual development, it's really hard to change the rules. When we're just talking about the rules, I agree with Gene. It's great that there are this many people here tonight when we're talking about what are the rules, because this is where it really matters that people are engaged and we can hear this input. Otherwise, we're talking to ourselves in a room with two people in it, and they're consultants for somebody, right? And we all try really hard, but we do a better job when we get lots of advice and lots of input, and that's why we need people like you to engage with us and talk with us about the way things ought to work. That's why we're here, is to try to make good recommendations and good decisions. But we can't do that in a vacuum. We can't do it by ourselves. And the issues aren't just real simple, go do this or don't go do that. They're really complicated. That's why we have to spend time working on them.
Can I ask one more thing?
Sure.
In some of these things, as you say, that the county owns road and the state owns road, can we sue to do what's right? Can we? I mean, I'll donate.
Go to their meetings.
You can do that. Absolutely, you can do that.
Okay.
I mean, it's their stuff, and I suppose there are ways that you can sue them, depending. But like any property owner, they got a lot of latitude to invest in or not invest in their stuff the way they want to.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move on, because we got a few other people who are signed up.
I did want to share with you,
Sure.
folks, that the county is in the middle of their transportation system plan update. So every road that they own that they're looking at, arterials and collectors, now is the time to be out there engaged with the county, asking them about what they can do to improve the capacity, what they can do to improve the functionality. but they're limited by the same tax dollars that you guys are saying that we don't necessarily have the money and resources to go out and make all the improvements that are going to make these roads better. And we're not able to stop development. We're not able to necessarily, we can slow it down through putting mechanisms and tools in place, and we can go for quality over quantity. But people are going to move to the area. There's always going to be traffic, and we can make improvements, and the improvements we make sometimes seem like we're putting a Band-Aid where a tourniquet belongs, but the simple fact of the matter is if you don't have the resources to address it, those businesses that are developing get passed on the cost. So it's not that we're unfair to small businesses. We have heard from citizens in the past that we want development to pay for the cost of the improvements that they're making or passing on to the citizens, as opposed to raising taxes. So that's where those SDC charges come from. And that's why it may seem unequitable that a smaller business might be charged the same SDC as a big business, but we do have to be equitable in that. And it's based on the number of traffic trips that are generated. It's based on the number of fixtures for sewer and water. So Walmart's going to have a lot more traffic trips generated. They're going to have a lot more sewer and water fixtures in their building. So they're going to pay higher SDCs than, say, a smaller business that doesn't have as many.
Let's not get too far afield, and let's go ahead and try to move on. R.J. Claus.
I think you've got to change that to 4 minutes, don't you? Robert James Claus, 22211 Southwest Pacific Highway. I'm going to use big words your staff won't understand, like content analysis. I do a word search in here. You mention one name more times in this document than you have pages. Now, I wouldn't squawk when people come in and bring that name up. The second thing that's amazing is you've got misspellings in here. I expect that. But take your acknowledgments. You don't even mention Butterfield. Now, there's a more interesting point when you start that content analysis. Never once do you mention the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now I'm going to use another big word, benefit cost analysis. You can't put the stormwater facility in on Columbia because you don't have the money. Yet you're talking about raising the density and the runoff. Well, now that's interesting. But you're not affecting Stella Olson Park walkway to the refuge. This has absolutely major impact on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge. It's never mentioned in here once. There's a name mentioned 25 times. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is never mentioned once. Do me a favor. Stop squawking when people bring up somebody's name if you can't keep it out of a document. And number two, don't tell me this is a plan when you're missing the central feature in this town, which is its riparian corridors and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Refuge. This isn't a plan. This is the density, cut down density, add more parking. And then you actually suggest we're going to have another deal like we had on these apartments over here, that the city council signs it off 2.5 years before they bring it to a public hearing, and then tell us, oh, talk about it when it's a cut deal, the density, the parking, the design. Please. If you're going to have something like this, do the favor of getting the U.S. Fish and Wildlife in here, find out the impact that's going to have on what you might call it a benefit cost analysis, quality of life. Now try to understand another thing. Your brilliance downtown with this city hall has actually lowered value of these units. These units downtown are about 20% less valuable than the stuff outside of this area. Why? It's your brilliant urban planning job. You're turning this into someplace nobody in the right mind wants to live in. It's a good thing we got a funeral parlor downtown. It fits better than a living environment. I can't even believe what you're talking about. You never talk about once the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, never once about the corridors, never once about the runway. Oh, but we're going to have stormwater facilities. Where? On the top of Patrick Lucas's building that got foreclosed on? I mean, I don't even know what you people, and you say we're going to have a dialogue. We're not going to have a dialogue. What you're going to have is tell every citizen where they're wrong. and nothing else. There's no dialogue here. This thing just, and your 33 action points, well, you got one thing right, density, smaller, more units, more SDCs. That's what this is about, is creating an income source for a staff that shouldn't be here in the first place.
Lori Randall.
Hi, I'm Lori Randall, 22710 Southwest Orchid Place, Sherwood. I live, just for what it's worth, kind of on the, what Jim was just saying, I live across from the Insta slums on Willamette that came with, where our contract, and people should know, was signed 2 years prior to public hearings on that. I'd love to make sure that that's not happening anywhere else in Sherwood, that that's not going to happen again. So I throw that out there. I'd like to see the results of the survey published online. I'm not especially trusting, and I'm getting more so. The city is getting better with the new administration, but I'm still not very trusting. If somebody tells me that some people say this and most people say that, I want to see the numbers. So I'd really like to see that survey published online with the answers that people are giving. I did a lot of talking to people about, that survey and begging them to fill it out. The things that people were most concerned, and certainly that I'm most concerned about, the density. I think we all saw that nice big fat line up Sherwood Boulevard in front of the schools. We need that. Why? Making Old Town a walking district is redundant. If you look around, people walk all over Old Town Sherwood. It's when people come to visit me, they're amazed at how many people are out on the streets walking. So to say that you're going to make it more of a walking district by cutting the cars is silly. People from Woodhaven are not going to bike over here anyway. So density. The height of the buildings, again, I live in front of the Insta slums. They're blocking out every tree that I previously had a view of. The two monstrosities in Old Town, don't need to see those. We do not need 5-story buildings. We do not need infill in every possible location. 0 setbacks, no, we don't need that. Let's see. What else? Yeah, I'm sure I had more to say, but that's what's coming out. I just would like you guys to really, as you're discussing this and talking to City Council about it, really take into account, well, okay, let's talk about the traffic for a minute. Everybody who lives here knows what reality is. Put aside the traffic studies, which are not reality. Anytime you look at Tualatin, Sherwood, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, it's backed up as far as you can see. We all know that. It's like, should Walmart get built, it's going to be that much worse. So I would hope that your recommendations to council on this and working with council are going to be to throw out a lot of what was in that plan that really doesn't fit Sherwood anymore. We do not need to be a town of 40 or 60,000 people because Metro thinks we should. Thank you.
Nadia Bello. Nadia.
So my name is Dottie Abelov, and I live on 22741 Southwest Lincoln Street, Sherwood, Oregon. I was supposed to say that right?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so I was kind of confused why you're calling the place where Walmart's supposed to go in. I don't want Walmart. I think you already know that. Go in, and so why are you calling that the town center and the town center? The town center is really confusing.
The basic issue is we're not the ones calling both things the same. The developer is calling it Sherwood Town Center, and they pretty much can call it whatever they want. We were here first, if that helps. That doesn't help much, I know.
Okay. And also, I was wondering, who decides, like, who, so there isn't a cap. Is there a cap on the big amount of buildings that can come in? Like, what's the cap? Is there a cap?
Brady, you want to talk to the code?
Yeah, we do have limitations on building sizes in our light industrial district, but we do not have limitations on the building size in commercial districts. And it's in our light industrial district limits it to 60,000 square feet, which is still a fairly large building.
So there's not a cap on.
Are you asking if there's a cap on the number of those buildings that we can have in Sherwood?
Yeah.
Or on the size of a
Both.
particular building?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, we have height, we have setbacks, we have parking requirements, which also dictate a lot of the size of a structure. But when you talk about several acres, it's not really, we don't have a cap on the size of your building if you meet all the other dimensional standards.
And we don't have a moratorium or a cap on the number of those sites that can be developed.
We have no moratorium and we have no.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we have a certain amount of acres that can be developed that way. And so there's some number of businesses that could be developed in that area, but that's not a number that we pick. That's whatever can be developed following all the rules.
So there's a number of businesses, big businesses, that can be developed? No. So no.
No, there's not.
Okay.
I think he's saying there's just a limited amount of property, developable property out there for specific uses.
Okay. So I think that was it. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nadia.
June Reynolds.
Hi, I'm
And
June Reynolds.
Before you start, I'd like to kind of wrap up public comment by about 9 if I can, so that we can actually try to get through some discussion of what's here. And I think what I've got now might leave room for another couple. So if you think you might want to testify, if you could get that form in, run, don't walk, to your nearest recording secretary, and so we'll try to wrap up. Thanks. Go ahead, June. Sorry.
Okay. I live at 22438 Southwest Hall Street, and I have been involved with this town that we know of as Sherwood since 1962, before the Columbus Day storm. So I've watched this place for many, many years, and this town has changed, as has this whole state of Oregon. But we've changed at such a rapid rate, and it really is concerning me. Because I am sort of the ad hoc historian of Sherwood, Oregon, the first thing I have to say is that I kind of object to the moniker of town center, because your area that you have, that you're delineating here with the land use and all, is really not the town center. The town center has always been Old Town, which of course I see you've got incorporated in there, sort of in there. But, and I highly object to Walmart calling themselves in their development the Sherwood Town Center. It is not the Sherwood Town Center. It never will be. That was the Langer Farm. I would be very happy to call it Langer Farm Center, Langer Mall, Langer whatever, because honestly, it's honoring the Langers. I grew up with the Langers. I know the Langers, and I remember their farm. But I honestly do not like the idea of calling it the town center. I walk this town. I've walked this town for the last 12 years. I used to walk to work, to school, all over. I still walk all over. I do not walk on Highway 99. I do not walk very much on the Sherwood to Wallaton Road, because they're highly dangerous roads. They are never going to be walkable. And there's some pie-in-the-sky idea that there's going to be some trail that's someday going to go over to the Wildlife Center, but I would consider that to be kind of a highly dangerous walk. It's a highly dangerous drive to go there when you're on 99 and you have to turn around and go back. These are all problems that are dangerous. So, you know, if you want to take that and put that in your study, that's a real good thing to do. I take children out to the Wildlife Center in a school bus. We have harrowing trips there. But then, of course, I remember back in 1965 when there wasn't even a stop sign at what I call Six Corners, which is, you know, the crossroads there of 99 and Edie Road. I mean, there was no stop sign there when I was a kid. And we went across 4 lanes of traffic with a school bus. And there were a couple of times that we prayed to God we'd make it across. So, you know, I know these things all too well, and it is dangerous. And it's not walkable. Now, if you want to put a walking bridge across it or something, that might work. But the idea that walking out to the Walmart store is going to be a lovely experience for people, or a lovely bike ride, forget it. And as things get more and more crowded, I mean, even Willamette Street out here is a giant bottleneck. It's already been a bottleneck, but now it's going to be a huge bottleneck. And why? It's because of density. My final point is support services. I worked at the high school for 10 years, and when I left the high school, even with the new wing, it was at capacity. And we joked around about, well, when the Target fails, we'll just use the Target building for our second high school. We actually joked around about that in meetings because we knew we couldn't facilitate a new building any other way. There was just no way. So we thought about doing that. I know that that's not very amusing, but we honestly thought it was going to fail. It didn't. And so we have a Target today, and we can buy pants there. I mean, I think that's great. But
you need to wrap up, Jen.
But the question is, do we have money in this community for schools, sewer, water, and indeed the roads? Do we have the money to expand? Do we really have that money? I don't think so, and I do not think that this community can support more of this development, and I want to thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen. Tony Bevel.
Good evening. My name is Tony Bevel. I live on Southwest Lindley Way since 1997. It's good to have you back, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
You've been gone way too long. Last week and the years before that, you should have been here. The reason why you have a lot of people here is because I think there's a lot of distrust in city government. I hope you keep your, promise that you made at the election. I'm sure you will. I also served, so I respect you. The reason why I'm not a traffic engineer, and 20, 30 years that this plan here is, I'm living in the here and now. I live on Southwest Lindley Way, which is off of Roy Rogers. I don't know if you did any traffic studies, but during the peak hours, people cut from Roy Rogers, Lindley Way to Houston out to Edie Road. I mean, I've picked up a dead cat, I've picked up a skunk off the road, okay? And, I hope that you consider building some traffic bumps in there. And we had one meeting a year ago at the police station, and we just kind of blew us off saying, well, we can't have it because of fire trucks not built or whatever. Well, other cities seem to have it, Lake Oswego, Tigard, or whatever. So in your study that you do, I hope you put in traffic bumps to keep the people who are going to circumvent your improvements and go through the neighborhoods, because it's a dangerous situation. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Naomi Bello.
Hello, my name's Naomi Vela. Do you want my address?
Please.
22741 Southwest Lincoln Street. So I have a question, which I think is at the heart of the matter here, and it's related to both Walmart and the town center plan. I've heard that the Walmart property is zoned in urban renewal. Okay, could you just confirm that for me?
I believe it's in the urban renewal area. Yeah.
Okay, so I've heard that because it is an urban renewal, that any of the profits from the land, I don't know how the taxes are run. I mean, I'm just learning about all this myself. But none of it will go for our schools, fire, police, roads, anything like that. It's not going to actually benefit our town. What it will be doing, from what I've heard, and this is rumor, so that's why I'm bringing it up, just to ask you, because you would know. Does it go to pay your salaries? Is that what the big draw of the Walmart is? Because it's paying salaries within the city government, the profits from that. That's what I'd like to know.
Sure. So none of us get paid anything to do this, right? So we're all citizens like you who are volunteers.
None of you at all?
Well, none of up here, the people you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
It's a better question for city council because they're the board of directors for the urban renewal district. But I'll take a crack at it at the risk of saying something wrong. The way urban renewal works is when you put an urban renewal district in place, which has been here for a long time, you freeze the values of the properties that are in the district, and then when new development comes in, the property taxes from that new development go to pay for the approved projects in the urban renewal district. Okay, and a piece of that is administration of the urban renewal district. It's a percentage, and I think it's a fairly small percentage.
Like 1.2.
But you get, I don't know. I wouldn't even try to guess what that number is. You have this list of projects, and when you get to the end of that list of projects, one of two things happens. Either you add on to it, which is called a major amendment, and there's stuff that has to happen to do that, or the district ends and it goes away. The school piece is really complicated because the money that we generate in property taxes, the more we generate, the more it reduces the amount the state sends us. So it's kind of a zero-sum game for the school part of that, but for fire and police and all that, you're exactly right. That money doesn't go to that, and it goes to the urban renewal district.
And that directly pays the salaries of the city employees?
No, like I say, there's a small percentage of the urban renewal district that pays for administration of the district, and there are people or person in that, but it's a small piece, and that's really a way better question for city council because we don't get into any of that stuff here.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you.
Mirda Meyer.
Good evening. My name is Mirta Meyer. My address is 24002 Southwest Middleton. I actually have a request, if that's all right.
Sure.
I'm wondering if recent traffic analyses can be provided on the Sherwood website from 1995 to current. What I would like to see is not only the traffic analyses, but also a comparison of population growth since 1995 to current. I'm really concerned about the capacity allocation program and how those trips are identified as prospective developers and their clients look at Sherwood. I think that the city of Sherwood, and I will also bring this up at council, but I really think that we need to re-review our capacity allocation program not to include net trips, including pass-by trips and internal trips, because I think that that provides a very skewed number of what actual traffic impact will be on our major arterials, including Tualatin and Sherwood Road. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
To me,
Pardon? And how that will all impact the town center plan. Additionally, I think related to the town center plan, I think oftentimes it's easier to plan for the cart without looking at the horse. And in some respects, I feel like that's happened. And I think why I say that is because we really don't have design standards within the city of Sherwood. There are guidelines, and as applicants have come to Sherwood and have applied to move into Sherwood, there have been some very arbitrary decisions made, and folks like our city manager are provided opportunities to make decisions based on recommendations, and that's concerning, because I think with a plan like a town center plan that will impact so much of our town, I think very specific design standards need to involve public comment like this. But I think those design standards need to really be established separately from a meeting where we have all these action items. Also, in regard to action item number 27, can I keep talking?
You're not going to be the first person I cut off right at 3.
I'll try to make it quick. And this is related a lot to SDCs and what we can do to promote, if we so choose, to promote a Main Street program. I brought this up at the last meeting, but I think that incentivizing small business through doing some storefront improvement projects, or incentivizing storefront improvement projects and providing discounted SDC fees for first-time business owners, that sort of thing, is something that I would like to see considered within Sherwood, similar to what the city of Gresham has done in the past. That's all I've got.
Great, thanks. Just on that last point, that's a great comment for council, because they really control the fee setting stuff and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Thanks.
Elizabeth Farnham.
Good evening. I really didn't plan on talking tonight, but I did have a couple questions.
Sure.
So, so property taxes aside, could someone explain to me why higher density is all the rage, is so encouraged? I mean, to me, it's bringing in, it's taxing on the schools. It provides lots of transient.
Sure. So I can take a crack at what I think about density and desperately invite other planning commissioners to weigh in. So we moved to Sherwood in 1998 when the population was about 9,000 people, right? And that had tripled over the last 7 years or 8 years from the 1990 census. And we moved here because, well, anyone in this room would come up with a list of 8 or 10 things, and I bet 6 or 7 of them would be the same on the list, right? We'd good schools, really nice neighborhoods, parks, walkable stuff, old town, and although we had the largest collection west of the Mississippi of corrugated metal buildings in Old Town when we moved here, so I'm not sure, but and we were at the edge. We lived in a place where in December. The pickiest family on earth could go Christmas tree shopping and be back in 30 minutes with the perfect tree, right? Farms and all those sorts of things. And it's, for me especially, it's that last one. Oregon is going to have more people in it in 10 or 20 years than it is today. And that means the Willamette Valley and Portland and the region are going to have more people in it than they are 10 or 20 years from today. And there's really only 2 choices for where those people are going to go. And I mean, they're our own kids, among other things, right? They're either going to go at a higher density in areas that are already built up, or they're going to go in the next farm field out, right? And so if a piece of what I value is the fact that we're at the edge and that we have these riparian areas, we're connected to nature, we're connected to farms and forests and those kinds of things, one of the only ways to preserve that in some sense is for some of that growth to be density and not just moving the line further and further out. We do a little bit of moving the line already, right? In the time that I've lived here, we've added the Brookman area down to Brookman Road. We've added some stuff between here and Tualatin. We've added little snippets here and there where there were odd-shaped places to fill. We added all of the area where Edie Ridge and Laurel Ridge are. And so we're trying to do both. But if we basically say we want the neighborhoods and the blocks and the development to be the exact same density as today, the only choice then is to go further and further out into those farm fields. And I love the fact that our kids can go into a Safeway somewhere, clear across the state and see potatoes from Amstead Farms, and it says Sherwood, Oregon on the bag, and that's the trade-off is to keep that. That's why I think some kinds of higher density done the right way is really important.
Done the right way.
Anybody else want to? I'm way out on the end of a limb.
I concur completely. Is the only way to keep and protect our farmland is to make density done right in Sherwood, and that's what we're trying to do, is figure out what does done right in Sherwood look like. How do you increase density and protect the farmland and still keep an old town feel? And it is a very difficult question to answer correctly. And the last person who said design standards, those are great until you're the person that can't do what they want to do because it doesn't look like what the city's telling you it has to look like. So you have to balance, if you want it easier for a small business to come in and do something, you can't put design standards on it that are so hard to comply with. And so we struggle with those decisions every time we try and put together a plan or try to create a code that makes Sherwood stay the same while we're still trying to move forward. It's a no-win situation in some situations where you have to grow in order to protect what you want to value.
Do you, so I have a couple other questions.
Yeah.
So looking at, you probably know I'm not for higher density. Is there a communication with the school district? Obviously, you've worked hard to get it that way, Sherwood being one of the most family-friendly cities to live. One of the reasons it is that is because we have great schools. We are a young community, primarily, lots of young kids. We have great preschools in our community, great schools. And when you're looking to do higher density, someone mentioned it earlier, the schools are already at capacity. Is there communication with the schools looking at that?
I can answer that one.
Well, the one thing I would observe is there's actually a mix of schools that are at capacity and schools that are significantly under capacity right now.
Okay.
So
the
it
zonings
varies
may
a lot.
change again.
Yeah, and that's the one committee, even less fun than this, that I would
Right,
never do
right.
as a school
No,
boundary
I hear
committee,
you.
right?
Well, and one thing to say is Oregon law doesn't allow, and the staff can correct me, but I have battled this for many years, because you can put a moratorium and have the city you can say we don't have enough water and so we can stop anybody from building in the city. But if you don't have room in your schools, Oregon law does not allow you to say.
Stop building.
And it has nothing to do with our city. It has nothing to do with our council. It has to do with the Oregon law. And the way it's crafted is you can't consider whether the school has room for the next child to come in when you approve a development. And that is your state legislature.
Okay. So my next question, why are we looking at bringing in more commercial development while we currently have many vacancies in the developments we have?
Michelle, do you want to talk to that?
A couple of things. This plan, the outlook, is a long-range plan, and there is no change to any of the zoning that currently exists right now. So when we're talking about the high-density residential, it doesn't change. There's no zoning changes that come with this adoption, or no changes that come with where we currently have retail commercial zoned. So the changes come in the incentivization and in creating that synergy, vacant storefronts, filling in where there isn't currently any buildings, kind of the vacant infill areas.
So you're saying your priority is to fill the current vacancies that we have before building? Is that what I'm hearing? I'm sorry.
It's a plan. It's a work in progress. So taking a look at what the policies are, saying, well, we want to really encourage that walkability. We want to make this an area where people can get their needs met for work, however that happens, what are some of the action items? What are some of the ways, the carrots or sticks that we as a local government can do, because we can't order businesses to come in, and we just have to provide incentives for that, and where do we want to see those happen? So where can we create that appropriate mix to get the way and look of the community that we want to see?
The way I would add to Michelle's answer is all of the land we're talking about can already be built on by developers, and right now a lot of what it can be built on is sort of traditional, put up a strip center or a box of some kind and have it be car dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what this is about, if we can get to a place where it makes sense, is to actually create an environment where you've got the kinds of physical structures that are better for more small businesses. It's tempting to look at storefronts today when we're at the end of a really horrible recession and say we shouldn't be adding anything more. The flip side of that is if you wait until things are booming, and cities around Oregon have done this before, where you're in a big boom and you say, oh my God, we need hundreds of new acres of land to develop, and you go add a bunch of stuff to your boundary, and then the next cycle comes and you've got all this vacant land. So we're trying to balance all that stuff. But when I see the renderings of things like a 3-story building, out somewhere on Langer or something like that, what I see are doctor and dentist offices and small professional businesses and those kinds of things, not big giant corporate kinds of businesses. And I think what we're trying to do, if we can get there, is to create an environment that's better for that kind of thing.
And then, so I grew up in Colorado.
This is your last one, and then we're going to move on.
Yes, it's sunny 300 days of the year, pedestrian friendly. You know it rains 9 months here.
Or more.
So I mean, I have 3 little kids. I know that they're not going to be coming out and walking, from where we live to this kind of an area. And I just wonder if you've thought of, and this is just a rhetorical question, if you've thought of sort of those sorts of things. I know Bridgeport's much less busy in the wintertime. Businesses are, traffic is down. So I guess maybe don't swing the pendulum too far one way is my...
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Eugene Stewart. He's still here.
Eugene Stewart. I live outside of Sherwood. I have property in town. I did live in the town since about 1946 up through the 60s, moved back in 72, and then moved just outside of town in early 90s. When I lived here, there was more people who went to school from out of town than in town. As things rotated around, downtown could no longer support the type of businesses that the people needed to do their everyday shopping and everything. And the main reason was, or one of the biggest reasons, as businesses have grown, they are working at a much smaller margin than when they did back in 1946. A prime example I've given several times, you can drive over to Hillsborough, the back roads through Shoals, and from Shoals back into Hillsborough, you'll probably be able to observe at least a dozen places where there used to be a gas station or maybe a store, and it supported a family. They could no longer support a family based on the fact that it takes volume now for a business to survive. So therefore, downtown, you look at here, in 2.5 years, we have not drawn one new business across the street. And nobody can answer that question, but I think you should be looking at that. The other thing is that you are concentrating all the commercial business in one area called Six Corners. And as you make this huge glob out there, you are going to create traffic problems. Not only you're going to have people from residential on the other side of town cutting through Old Town, not stopping. I work in downtown at least one day a week, and my observation is that about 90% of the traffic coming through Old Town is not stopping. This has become a through street, and I don't believe that will really help any of the businesses down here. And then one of your great things is that you want to narrow streets to make them to calm them down. Well, if you increase the traffic and you slow it down, you're going to have traffic problems. And that's on, whether it's on 99W or on 12th and Sherwood Road. I had the opportunity, I was over in Boise last week. They've got the same problems. My mother-in-law lives in North Side, Boise, nice quiet neighborhood. It's only 5 minutes away from downtown. But yet a lot of people still have to live out of town. But in driving like through Meridian, one of the things that they did is that they've got 5-lane roads that run north and south, east and west. Speed limit 55 or 45 miles an hour, so people out there can get around. Yes, I admit it's hard to get downtown. So we seem to plan inadequately for the traffic. The other thing I've noticed is that what would have happened if we really had a citizens' involvement plan that was adopted? The one that you say you do have was repealed when you rewritten Part 1 because the citizen involvement plan was in Part 1 and that was never redone. You have a lot of good people out here that have a lot of good ideas that would mix with the staff's ideas and your ideas, and I think there wouldn't be so much headbutting if we tried to really get together. And you're missing a great opportunity here. And I know you say you don't want to go past 9 o'clock. Same thing again, if there are more people who want to speak, they don't get to speak. So you've cut down the citizens' involvement. So you need to start to think, how can we make this a better process than what it is? Thank you.
Great, thank you. The last sheet I have is Brian Hagan.
I'm Brian. Oh, I'll get to the mic. I'm Brian Hagan. I live on 22471 Southwest Murdoch. I had a very quick comment and a very quick question, and I won't need my whole time. The first one was, where I live on Murdoch looks directly across at the Federal Wildlife Preserve, the bird refuge. There are signs there saying no trespassing. There's currently not entry to it. I understand that the bird refuge is spread out really throughout the county, through a lot of different areas. And for the migratory birds and the waterfowl and all those, they move between those, of course. I've heard about the state and the county regulations and how that affects development. Is there any coordination with the federal as far as the bird refuge, and because it is federal property, and developments around that?
Sure, and before I turn it to Michelle to answer that, I skipped Kathy Holloman, so I'll come back to you. Michelle, you want to speak to that?
So if there is a current proposal for something that's nearby the refuge, for example, then they would receive notice of that project that would be upcoming. And also acting as agencies, we send out notice to all the agencies within the area concerning the project. I would say that we're pretty close partners with the refuge, and what we know the areas that they have protected. We also follow Clean Water Services requirements, DSL requirements, and those often are in tandem with the requirements of the refuge.
Have we reached out to them specifically on this plan?
On the town center plan? No, I don't think so.
So that's something we could talk about?
Sure.
Okay.
My thinking with the town center plan was just because there'd be a lot of increased lighting at night. I know there would be a lot more traffic, a lot of things. Just from other situations I've read about, I know usually there's federal input or regulations even about things that surround it. So right now they haven't been notified of this one.
I can't think of any property that's very close at all to the refuge from the town center perspective. We have requirements for half a candle foot lighting requirements. And those conditions would continue. Do you have anything?
So we'll talk more about how to reach out to the refuge.
Okay.
As a part of our discussion on it.
Okay. I'll clear. Just my last comment
Sure.
was, it's obvious to me why a business like Walmart would want to come here to Sherwood. There's great opportunity for profit for them. From what I've seen so far, I just don't really see the benefit to the people of the community from the project of Walmart coming here. That's just my opinion.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Kathy Holloman. Sorry, I got to turning my pages too
That's okay.
aggressively.
That's okay. My name is Kathy Holloman. I live at 14735 Southwest Brook Court in Sherwood. So first of all, I just want to speak real quickly toward her comment about schools can't turn away kids of overcapacity. And definitely we need to make sure that we're planning for the growth in terms of our schools and the cost that will take. I'm a high school teacher. I just passed my 20-year mark this year. When I started teaching, I had a shared class of 50 students with another teacher. Now I have in one of my classes 56 kids plus 4 TAs. So I have 60 kids in my own personal care at one time. And I can tell you for sure, I'm a damn good teacher, but my teaching is compromised when I have to take care of 60 kids at one time. I personally have knocked on over 60 house doors in the last 2 weekends, asking people and educating people about the possible ordinances for the city to pass to hopefully make it less desirable for Walmart to come here. And what I heard from those 60 people is that most of them do not want Walmart. I only had 5 that wouldn't sign. What I heard over and over again were their concerns about the traffic and the crime and the type of people that a Walmart would bring. I even had one man who was a detective for Multnomah County, and he said that his biggest concern with Walmart is the crime that it will bring. Walmart has a no check ID policy. They don't ID people. You can cash a check without ID. And the identity thieves know this, and it is rampant. Another thing is that with the 20 retail stores, obviously traffic is going to increase. The business practices not supporting our families in Sherwood, I think, is huge because this is a family community. And what I also heard is that people were really excited that they might be able to have a say in whether or not Walmart will come here through the passage of the city ordinances. And I know you guys don't have anything to do with that, that's city council, but whatever we can do to help make that happen. And so just the main message that I heard over and over again is people love the small town of Sherwood. And I would just ask that you consider slowing down development. We've lived here since 1997. I grew up in a small town. I love Sherwood because it's a small town. When I heard the 50,000 mark on the population growth that's projected, that's not a small town. And I know that we need to develop. We are going to develop. That's inevitable. I love the residential neighborhoods that we have. The high density I'm less excited about, even though with people coming into town, they need to go somewhere. But if we can develop residential neighborhoods, like on the Langer property part of it, versus high density, that would, I think, be more in line with what Sherwood wants.
That 50,000 number. Where I've seen that pop up in a few places. I was wondering where you're getting that number.
I have been doing so much reading. I don't recall exactly where that. Somebody else brought it up earlier today. The 50,000. Washington County's website.
Okay. So that was the number for the whole corridor, right?
That's the entire southwest corridor. That's not Sherwood. Yeah. So that's all the way from Portland all the way out here.
Yeah, but from Southwest Portland to Sherwood.
Not here.
That's impossible.
It's impossible.
You couldn't build houses that fast.
We have a projected.
If you wanted to.
We have a projected growth.
Hang on.
Yeah, it's to the entire corridor, which includes Portland.
So we need to add that to the FAQ and get the for sure source data on that, because I think there's all kinds of numbers running around right now that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Thank.
And
let's not turn into a general.
Yeah.
But Yeah.
We grew at 1% last year. We gained 10 people. And 1.8% over the next 5 years would generate about 20,000 people. Not 20,000 new people, a total of 20,000 people. We're at 18,265 now. We would be just at over 20,000 if we grew at 1.8% compounded over that 5 years. But we didn't grow at 1.8 last year. We only grew at 1%.
Great, thanks very much.
Thanks.
So let me ask, is there anybody else who wants to come up and testify?
I don't want to testify, but I think.
No, I need you to not do it from the back of the room because we need to be able to hear you on the record. So if you,
I just want to recommend something.
So come on up and recommend.
Right.
Brian Smith, 21037 Southwest Houston Drive.
Thanks.
Okay. I'd like to recommend that you guys keep that survey up for at least another month, if not longer, to give
There's no
people
reason to
time.
pull it down, is there?
No, we're planning to keep it open until really we have some resolution on a final draft plan.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's all.
So by all means, push people to that survey because it's great that we have a survey, but we've had 30 people or 40 people take it, which we need more of. So is there anybody who's not already testified who would like to testify tonight? If not, then we're going to go ahead and close public testimony tonight. Again, there's going to be multiple opportunities on this topic to come back with us and with the city council. But right now, we're going to take a 5-minute recess and then come back and have some conversation. All right, let's go ahead. Let's talk for a minute about what we want to do. We don't have time to thoughtfully go through 33 of these, I don't think, unless anybody wants to be here way later than I want to be here. But we do have a joint meeting coming up next Tuesday with council, and so it seems like we ought to at least kind of organize our thoughts a little bit. Who all is planning on being at that session? Yeah, I figured. So it looks like most of us will be here. So I'm open to suggestions of how to work through what we've got here. Lisa.
Well, if we could identify, oh gosh, how can you identify just a handful of these? I think that, does the staff have some direction for which areas they anticipate?
Well, some of the things
real
are
focus of the
really
meeting?
important to make sure that we have a plan and to make sure that we have a boundary and to kind of talk about some of the transportation improvements or table some of those to the TSP update to get some direction on those. I think that through the adoption plan, there's probably 8 code changes that are really kind of technical in nature that you could kind of take a look at and see if there's any easy wins out there for those that there's some consensus on. And then through the short-term or long-term items, some of them can be bundled together, I think, when we're talking about design standards or parking studies or things like that, to talk a little bit about time frame. When it comes to do you want to have 0 setbacks or no setbacks or kind of thinking about that, I think that those are kind of items that really do need some more thorough discussion, and we could take a higher view than what is listed in the action plan as far as the consultants go. You know, as far as what's been identified as really kind of some specific changes, and that kind of goes along with the community design standards. We've heard, oh, well, let's evaluate those, our existing standards maybe, and maybe an action item is to tweak that and say this needs some further study to see if we want to make any changes that way.
And yet that's what you're suggesting for tonight before next Tuesday. That's what,
well, to
right?
To see if there's anything that
easy jumps out at us, so we can. First of all, we could do that, I suppose.
Okay.
Let me go a little bit different direction.
Okay.
If I could, because I maybe pulled my thoughts together enough to. We're gonna have what, 30 minutes with the council?
Yes.
Give or take.
An hour.
Is it an hour?
An hour.
Still not very long, right? I think we need guidance from the council about do they want higher density or not, right? Because we've heard a lot of comment, and there's a lot of stuff in the survey that basically is no more density, and we can have all kinds of arguments here amongst ourselves about what we think about that one way or the other. But I would really like some guidance from the council of really where do they want us to go sort of foundationally with this in terms of what is it we're trying to achieve from that kind of a standpoint.
And I'd like it broken down in a similar manner to how you've got 3 districts. Do we want, and what would it look like with increased density in Old Town? Are we on track with increasing density and accessory dwelling units and increased mixed use opportunities in the central neighborhood development? And are we on track including the Langer commercial part as a goal to be a walkable community addition?
Mm-hmm.
If the council is on board for those 3 areas, then I believe we could then start crafting something. I see them as distinctively different. I would not want the same criteria that we use in Old Town to be implemented on the Langer commercial or vice versa. It's 2 different things, and we've got a town center plan that's trying to, in my opinion, put an overlay that encompasses 2 or 3 distinctly different areas. So that's how I would like to get direction from council to say, are we on track with size and the goal on those 3 areas?
So size meaning height.
The size of the plan, the town
center, the area, okay.
Town center, the town center was designated 6 corners for the purposes of Metro's transportation back in the 1990s. And that's why we ended up with a purple dot on the 2040 Metro plan, was the town center for the city of Sherwood was 6 corners for transportation purposes. Now we're repurposing the town center to mean what's the center of Sherwood? What's the core and the heart of Sherwood? As we've heard tonight, that's Old Town. What benefit do we have by incorporating the Langer commercial and that neighborhood as our town center? And are we on track with doing that?
To not have their input would be a.
That was kind of a question that came up back in January. Why, where would the boundary be? And so part of the conclusion was that this was somewhat of a compromise. If you concentrated all of the growth and development in Old Town, it would really muck up what's here already. So that's why the density was determined to be kind of spread out to encompass the whole area. So some of the congestion.
I understand I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I understand what the consultants are telling us. The councils are elected officials and they have to represent the city. And if they don't back the plan, then we are doing what we did on many other plans, which is to go, well, we'll take 3 different stabs at it and wait for the council to tell us whether we're going the right way or not. I'd like the council to weigh in if we're going on the right way.
So the initial section, like what is the boundary that you want to? Can you confirm this boundary, or do you think that it needs some further tweaking?
I'm it's sort of a head scratcher to figure out how to respond to the 70% who think the boundary in the survey who think the boundary is the wrong boundary without the further question of wrong how.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, when you look at the survey results, granted, it looks like the average response is about 35 to 37, but if you take that as a fair glimpse into what the majority of people, or how the majority of people in Sherwood feel about that, I mean, it's pretty obvious. There's a lot of opposition to a lot of this. And so I agree I'd like council's input as well.
Do we have anything on the Planning Commission for the 11th of June? If we take this work session as our next step, and then on the 11th, is there anything on the calendar for that? Or should we?
No, I think it's open.
I mean, we could maybe reconvene at that point.
On the 11th.
Come back and work it after we talk with the city council and.
I think that's a good idea. Do a work session with the Planning Commission before we get into hearings. I'd also recommend that maybe we start a little bit earlier to give you. We would start at a work session time like at 6 o'clock, as opposed to 7 o'clock to give you.
You're not suggesting we're not terribly fresh, are you?
I'm not. No.
Does that mean we still have to work till 11?
I'm sure you've all had long days.
Obviously, I think the more time we get with council, the more we can accomplish. So.
Well, he's saying 6 o'clock for the work session for the 11th.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Because we have an hour next week, and then
6,
we just plan a work session for the 11th starting at 6.
Okay.
I think it would be a good idea for you all to look at each one of the action items, look at the plan, and get your big picture questions together for your discussion with council. And then we can hash out the details in work sessions. It goes to both of you for hearings. This can evolve throughout the course of those hearings at both Planning Commission and City Council. And again, I think that your big questions like what Commissioner Simpson has been coming up with are valid questions for the council.
So, Gene, can you tee those 3 things up again?
So the first, really? No. The first question would be Old Town. Are we on the right track for increasing the density? And what would it look like? The central neighborhood, should it be included? And are we on track with mixed use on the Sherwood Boulevard corridor? And what benefit is gained by including the Langer commercial property? And does it make sense to include it as part of a walkable town center?
And then the Sherwood overlay.
You're not talking about the new project. You're talking about the existing
I'm
Langer
talking about
commercial.
Albertsons.
That's right.
Albertsons.
Right.
The theater in that area.
Well,
So-
the theater's not included, so
What about the Sherwood, or
That's right.
the overlay, the downtown overlay?
yeah.
That
So
was part of that first part.
Brad, you've not had a lot of opportunity to work with me before. I know Chris has, because he's over there cringing at all the thoughts of all the questions I could probably have, probably Michelle too, because I have 33 questions to go with every single one of these things and concerns and comments.
I would ask that you get them to me ahead of the meeting so we can prepare something for you.
Oh, no. We'll wait while you answer.
But, big questions are, how does this overlay interact with the Old Town overlay that's already existing? There are design standards in Old Town. There are criteria that we have to meet. And, so I don't know how to interact with you to ask all my questions.
Well, I will tell you that my plan before the work session next week is to look at each one of these 33 action items and give you a comparison of what our existing code would allow and what this action item would do and how it would change that. But I mean, the other broader questions I think are valid. Do you want added density in the central neighborhood? Do you want mixed use? Do we even want to consider the Six Corners area? I would just keep in mind that there were people from the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that were from Six Corners that wanted their area to be included. There were people from Old Town that wanted their area to be included. So I think that throughout that process, there was probably a marriage of those folks in that that's how that boundary came about. But I certainly think that, again, at the end, it's going to be y'all's policy.
So I'm beginning to have in mind a kind of a discussion guide for the conversation with the council, and I'm taking Gene's 3 and I'm adding my sort of big picture density or not, right? Where do we want to go with the plan? And then one thing I would change maybe on yours about Old Town is shape that conversation a little more to say more density in Old Town, yes or no? If the answer is yes, here are the range of tools that we can be considering. Infill, curb height, kind of the stuff that's in here. Are any of them goes, no go, or are any of them particularly no goes? Don't bring us something that has 50-foot buildings, for example, or whatever the case is. If we kind of try to shape the conversation that way, that's sort of 4 topics, about 15 minutes per topic. That'll go by blindingly fast, I think.
Well, how do you guys have a PowerPoint ahead of time, which is 20 minutes or so?
Or are you going to do that?
Or have they had that already?
I don't know. We haven't thought that far ahead, but we only have a week to plan it. So
I
I
can
think
come at 5:30.
I think our plan was to obtain what concerns you had tonight and then structure a presentation.
Yeah,
Well, I
they've
guess
gotta have that.
not necessarily a presentation, because I think it's more of framing the discussion between the two bodies as to what you want this plan to come out as.
So one thing that I've been struggling with as having been on this commission before is that we can only once we put the rules in place as a commission, we can only abide by those rules. So we're setting rules now. I'd like to know what for instance, this is what it would look like. And you've done a couple of those examples on Sherwood Boulevard. I think that would be the handout to the council to say Sherwood Boulevard's proposed change to this town center designation would result in this. If this application came before you, would you be happy with it?
You know, I think it might also be beneficial if we identify locations or structures that would remain. I mean, historical significance, so people are not concerned that we might be tearing certain buildings down or relocating the school.
We can't control commercial. We can't control if someone wants to tear their building down and rebuild.
Unless if it's significant, historical.
Well, the Olive Old Town is a historic district, so you can know that the buildings in Old Town, they would have to go through a process to do that.
Right.
The other part is traffic. We got to have some sort of additional information about the standards that we're using and how valid they are and what choice we have in using them.
Yeah, I've got a much long, kind of like Gene's list of 33 questions. I've got a much longer list of things that we'll need to deal with. Some of that flows from sort of those guideposts from council for me.
I think we need to make sure that council knows that was a big hot topic tonight when we meet next week.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really important for us to, or at least for me, in discussing this, to consider the very strong opinions of these citizens that did the survey. When I look at these percentages,
and joined us tonight as well.
Yeah.
Well, and
I think it's really important that has weight.
Right. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And understanding, the traffic report we get is very large, and so if you sat and read it all, we probably could have filtered out in there someplace that it said that it included the MSTIP completely built out 12th and Sherwood from 99 all the way to Teton. Well, that's not reality. We need to know if your traffic numbers are based on a build out that has not yet occurred, then that would help us understand what those numbers mean, I think.
Plus, I don't think it's ever going to Teton.
And maybe some explanations on things like, I know one citizen had asked about the traffic and the traffic study, and answers came back like perceived traffic versus reality. And I mean,
it's frustrating.
As far as I'm concerned, the perception is the reality. I mean, people know the traffic's bad, so I'm not sure that I understand what perceived traffic, what that's supposed to mean in the reports. So, I mean, I perceive that I can't drive between Tualatin and Sherwood, so that's my perception. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions about the traffic study.
So, Chris, you have to come next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Well, probably not next Tuesday, right? Probably the Tuesday
on
after
the
that.
11th.
Oh, I guess isn't that?
Yeah, next Tuesday is the discussion with council.
Yeah. Oh, so he won't be there. Okay.
At the risk of opening a can of worms, there was a hand over here. I'm going to go ahead.
I don't want to.
It's not you that I'm worried about.
It's everybody else.
Yeah.
Do you want me to come up there?
No, go ahead.
So, there's been a lot of back and forth discussion on the name and the naming of Sherwood Town Center versus Sherwood Town Center Plan. And in recent years, other communities have named their town centers civic centers. And the term civic center, while originally it included civic uses like town hall and whatnot, that's shifted to include old towns and shopping centers. So perhaps in your discussions, you would be so kind as to consider referring to this plan as a civic center plan, as the hub or the core, the heart of Sherwood.
Or at least as something other than town center.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of concern about the fact that we've got this ongoing town center plan called Sherwood Town Center, and now Walmart wants to call Sherwood Town Center. I mean, their development Sherwood Town Center. So if Tom wants to address that really quick, because I asked that question during the break.
He's afraid.
You should have ran.
Of me.
All right, there we go. So just one of the comments that we heard tonight was something that council actually addressed.
If you could identify yourself.
Sure. My name is Tom Pestimer. I'm the Assistant City Manager here at the City of Sherwood. Council at their last meeting talked about a number of ordinances, but one thing they actually directed the city manager to do was to write a letter to the developers, Graymore and Langer developers, to highly recommend that they consider changing the name from Sherwood Town Center to something else. He did do that today, and it was pretty strongly worded to make sure that it met what the council directed him to do. Obviously, it's something that can't be required, but certainly something that council asked the city manager to do, and he did that today. So hopefully they will, of their own volition, make that change. And that won't become a problem, but your point of whether we should call this a town center is still valid, so I understand that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so in terms of being ready for the meeting, if we use that as kind of a rough discussion guide and with that set of issues, and then the notion that we come back to a work session on the 11th, was it, to work on this, my expectation would be that that really is a traditional work session where first order of business is to dive in and for us to discuss stuff and not do public testimony unless we feel like we want to get some more, recognizing that we'll have multiple further opportunities for public testimony as we work through the process. Does that?
I think the public testimony should come to us as a survey results, as a, a few days, a few days before, so we can take the.
Yeah.
Not that we're not having citizen comments, but they could just be an updated version of this report. I think that would be the best way to take citizen comments.
I like survey results, and I would encourage everybody out here, encourage everybody you know to fill out that survey. I like that we have gotten some feedback through that process, and I would love to see more numbers of people to get a better idea where people are seeing this.
Any other thoughts tonight?
Sure.
Then let me, it's not a formal council meeting or commission meeting, I know, but I think most of you know that I was on the ballot for school board this last election, and I was unopposed, so I did manage to win, and so I'll be stepping down from planning commission at the end of June.
Okay.
But, get that on your Get that on your radar.
Good.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to ask if for sure we could get the results of the survey published online for the citizens.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, and we can do that probably as at some point we can put it up and it can be sort of a rolling, updated periodically.
What do you think about that, Michelle?
It would have to be rolling. I mean, for one of the things that we'll do is we'll put a tally of the survey results. I mean, one of the objectives would be to have something available to you next week when you meet with council.
Right.
So and it is an ongoing and open, so it's not something that we can just
freeze at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, I know that there's another couple of hands, so I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We'll all still be here for a minute or two if you want to come up and ask individual questions, and we'll go ahead and adjourn the steering committee meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.